Have you ever left one conversation feeling heavier than when you entered it, even though nothing dramatic happened? No fight, no open insult, no obvious manipulation. And yet, half an hour later, your mind is crowded, your confidence is lower, your body feels slower, and the things that were clear before now feel uncertain. Then on another day, another person speaks to you for 10 minutes, and you leave sharper, steadier, more alive. If you keep treating that as random chemistry, you stay vulnerable to the strongest atmosphere in the room. By the end of this video, you'll understand what you're actually tuning into, why certain people seem to leave you stuck, and where the signal changes before their state becomes yours. And when I say signal, I mean something precise, not an aura, not a mystical frequency. I mean the vibration underneath someone's words, the moving quality of their state, the pace of it, the emotional tone of it, the expectation inside it, the way it organizes attention, speech, reaction, and meaning. Some people carry a state of haste, some carry suspicion, some carry depletion, some carry complaint disguised as intimacy, some carry quiet authority. You do not need to believe in any of this to recognize it. You already do. You know the person whose presence makes you start explaining yourself too much. You know the person around whom your standards soften. You know the person who leaves everyone slightly more bitter, slightly more cynical, slightly more tired. And you also know the opposite, the rare person whose presence makes you speak more truthfully, breathe more freely, and remember what matters without effort. So what is happening there? Not magic in the childish sense, not mind control, not fate. What is happening is that states move. And when a state is strong enough, consistent enough, and repeated enough, it tries to set the rhythm for the exchange. Conversation is never just words. It is also transmission of pace. One person speaks from lack, and suddenly everything becomes urgent. One person speaks from fear, and ordinary choices start to feel dangerous. One person speaks from inner order, and confusion begins to lose its grip. The words matter. But the movement underneath the words matters first. That is why two people can say almost the same sentence and produce completely different effects in you. The content sounds similar. The signal is not. Now, if what I just described sounds familiar, what comes next is the part most people resist. But it is also where everything becomes useful. Here is the first turning point. What leaves you stuck is often not the person alone. It is the moment your system starts matching their rhythm. Because it means the problem is not only they drain me, it is also something in me becomes available to their state. If that sounds severe, stay with it. When you are clear, inwardly gathered, and not secretly hungry for approval, not every signal enters you the same way. You can hear agitation without becoming agitated. You can witness doubt without inhaling it. You can stand near complaint without reorganizing your whole perception around it. But when you arrive internally loose, tired, eager to be accepted, or already split against yourself, you become easier to tune. Then the outer signal does not merely pass by you. It starts using you as material. This is why certain people feel stronger than they are. Not because they possess some supernatural power, but because their state is coherent, and yours is negotiable. And the more often this happens, the more you confuse repetition with truth. If you repeatedly feel small around one type of person, you may start calling that realism. If you repeatedly feel rushed, you may start calling that ambition. If you repeatedly feel depleted, you may start calling that loyalty. But many forms of stuckness are simply borrowed motion that had enough time to become familiar. You think you are dealing with personality. Often you are dealing with entrainment, one rhythm pulling another into itself. Look at how ordinary this is. Someone speaks to you from chronic scarcity. They do not merely talk about money, work, or risk. They carry an entire interpretation field around those things. After enough time with them, possibility starts feeling irresponsible. You become narrower without noticing the moment it happened. That is how signal becomes practical, not invisible glitter around bodies. The way one state sets the tempo for your perception, and then your life starts making decisions inside that tempo. Now we are halfway through, so let's make the road visible. Up to this point, we've named the mechanism. What comes next is the more important part, how the signal changes. The signal changes when you stop taking the other person's state as the governing reality. That sounds simple, but it is the whole pivot. Because most people try to change the words while already trapped inside the tone. They argue inside the other person's urgency. They defend themselves inside the other person's suspicion. They explain themselves inside the other person's scarcity. So even when they respond well, the deeper rhythm has already been lost. This is why you can leave a conversation and feel that you betrayed yourself, even if you technically said nothing wrong. You spoke from their weather. The shift starts earlier than speech. It starts at the moment you notice, my attention is narrowing, my inner tempo is no longer mine, my body is preparing to match instead of witness. That moment is small, but it is decisive. Because once you notice that matching is beginning, the exchange is no longer unconscious. And once it is no longer unconscious, it is no longer absolute. Changing the signal does not mean pretending to be high vibration. It means refusing to let a lower organizing rhythm become your operating ground. Sometimes the change is internal. You stop granting emotional authority to the person in front of you. Sometimes it is relational. You stop feeding the dynamic that only survives through your availability. Sometimes it is structural. You shorten exposure or stop meeting that person on the terrain where their signal dominates. But beneath all three is one law. The signal that governs the exchange is the signal that shapes the outcome. So if you want to understand why you feel stuck around certain people, stop asking, "What did they say to me?" Ask, "What started moving in me when they spoke? Did I become hurried? Defensive? Smaller? Foggy? Did I start abandoning what I knew 5 minutes earlier?" That is the real reading, not their personality, not your story about them, the movement. Because once you can read the movement, you no longer need to dramatize every person who affects you. You simply become more exact about signal. And the deepest change is this. You stop seeing yourself as someone who absorbs energy in a helpless way and start seeing where you have been, unconsciously consenting to a rhythm that was never yours. One is superstition mixed with passivity. The other is discernment. And discernment is what gives you your life back. If this gave language to something you felt many times, but never named, leave a comment with the one word that describes the person who came to mind while watching this. And if you want to go deeper into the mechanics of inner authority, subscribe. This channel does not deal in spiritual comfort. It deals in discernment.